Well, welcome back to my conversation with Howie Milstein. I hope you tuned in to episode 1. Rule number 3 podcast, committed to an asshole-free workplace. We had a lot of fun in episode 1, but we're going to have a lot more fun in episode 2, Howie, because I want to start with some of my favorite things that I've heard you say. But, you know, if anyone visits your website, the Institute, Stop Taking Yourself So Seriously, you have it on there as well. And I'm just going to start with what I like to call some of my favorite Howie-isms. And I'm just going to let you talk about what it means and why it's, you know, part of your message and where it came from and how, you know,
Oh my God,
how
I
you
am
got to
so
this.
thrilled
Are you
that there's
excited?
even something that exists called Howie-isms.
It's I'm going to trademark the term. You can steal it and use it all you want, but
I've always wanted a Howie-ism.
Here's my first Howie-ism.
All right.
You're dead a long time.
Oh, yes.
Talk to me about that.
I just think
it's true, but you know, when I read it, it's just one of those things you read it and you're like, man, I love it. But yeah, tell us about you're dead a long time.
So, and I've got a little more perspective on this than even when I started saying that. I've been saying that for 20 years.
Yeah.
I think it's valuable to occasionally and regularly contemplate your mortality. And the value there is what is the legacy that you want to leave? How do you want people to remember you? What did you really give them?
Yeah.
Right. And by doing that, first of all, it takes some pressure off of how important anything is at any given time. Right. It's good for you. But it's also good because, you know, if you want people to say, you know what, he was a great person, was always there for me, kind, good listener.
Right.
It'll dictate your behavior today or right now. So it's sort of a way to just to check in with what your values are, what's really important to you.
Yeah.
And say, let's just, you know, life is short.
Right.
You know, you're going to die penniless anyhow. You can't take it with you.
Right.
And is it worth playing a zero-sum game?
Yeah.
For your own gain, you know?
Right.
And you know, so it's contemplating and I take people through this exercise.
Yeah.
You know, I'll have them write their obituary a little bit, and then I'll have them, you know, write a little epitaph for themselves. And I just had this conversation with Gail not that long ago.
Yeah.
And she's agreed to do it. I don't know if you can do this in a Jewish cemetery or not, but on the bottom of my tombstone, I just wanted to say, Howie gave a shit.
I love it.
Because don't you think that people would understand what that is?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, if I give a shit, that means I'm caring about other people, other things. You know, this is not all about me.
Right.
It's get me out of the picture. And that's my book is a lot about ego and self-interest. It's about serving others.
Yep.
And that's my legacy. So if I think, okay, I'm going to be dead, I picture my tombstone.
Yeah.
What does giving a shit look like? Right. And it means listening. It means caring. It means entertaining. It means putting a smile on someone's face, right? Yeah. Whatever that is.
Right.
It means washing the dishes once in a while for Gail, you know.
Well, and you know, we talked about this in our episode 1, but it's about being genuine and authentic, right? And I mean, I've known you for a decade, and the people that I know that have known you for a long time, I think if we saw that on your tombstone, we'd say, yeah, that about sums it up, right? Because you're real, you're genuine, you're authentic. You know, when you say something, we can tell that you mean it genuinely. So I think that a lot of that is, you know, aligned with what we talked about earlier. And when you use this in your coaching, what is it about the people that struggle with that you find? I mean, because writing your obituary, fine, but you know, the people who really maybe don't even subscribe to what you're talking to them about, is there something that you can point to that got them to that place?
Some people are really uncomfortable going there.
Yeah.
Some people just aren't comfortable with the impermanence of their existence.
Yeah.
So that it can be a more difficult experience for others.
Yeah.
But I usually don't have people go through that exercise until I know them a little bit.
Sure.
And I always, you know, I'll take my coachees through values exercises.
Yeah.
And then I'll help them with it.
Right.
I'll just draw from their values. Right.
Yeah.
I help them
Right.
with it and they say, God, that's really good. Thank you. Right.
Right. Right.
So, but you know, it again, that's that discomfort.
Right.
It's not comfortable contemplating your mortality.
No, it's a scary thing to think about for a lot of people. So this is maybe related to it. Howieism number 2, my next Howieism. Try to think of something funny at a funeral. And maybe it's all in the same, maybe those two are related, but
because if you think about
try to think of funny stuff at
funny stuff at a funeral. Yes. As you know, there's not a situation in life that I don't think we can't have a little bit of fun with.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes things feel really grave, but it's really important to come up with the lighthearted side whenever you possibly can. There are times when that's not possible.
Yeah.
Right. There are times, but for the majority of the time, especially within the context of business, there's funny stuff. And if you can point it out, you can laugh at it.
Yeah.
And it also makes you realize how not big of a deal you are. Right. So when you think about funny stuff at a funeral, it's always fun to think about funny stuff about the person that's just died. And some of my favorite funerals are the ones where people, where the kids or friends are eulogizing and going through this stuff and people are crying with laughter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you can get to the point where you're in a situation that is typically considered rather grave and still fine, now that's building your funny muscle.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
I think
I love it. I love it. All right. You ready for another Howieism?
Sure.
Everybody is afraid.
Oh, it is that emotion that triggers our subconscious brain and makes us do things that if we had full control of our faculties, we wouldn't do.
Yeah.
We've got the subconscious brain that can hijack your best intentions.
Yeah.
And one of the most common emotions, we feel is fear. And think of the dysfunction that fear drives. And you've already responded and reacted before you even identified the fact that you're afraid. Your subconscious brain is operating on its own. It is a total jerk in your head, that is like walking around like it owns the joint. And when people are afraid, they get defensive, they get loud, they get angry, and it just but sometimes to know that they're afraid helps you to maybe cut them some slack if they haven't behaved in the way you want them to behave.
Right.
But I also say that because you are a subset of everybody.
Yeah.
You are afraid too, whether you admit it or not. It's just such a part of the human condition that that your ridiculous subconscious brain just takes and say, hey, I'm just gonna have some fun with this. You're probably gonna die here.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's that mortal fear.
It is, and it's just something I think we all could spend a lot of time thinking about. I was watching a podcast that happened to be with Matthew McConaughey, coincidental, but he was telling a story about something that his grandfather said right before he passed away. And he said, I've had a lot of crises in my life and most of them never happened. And and I love that. I'm like,
that's awesome.
It's so good because we are afraid about stuff that we just, and we can't control it. And we
it's
worry
the whole
about
MSU
stuff.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. MSU. Yeah, exactly. And so I love that. I've had a lot of crises in my life and most of them never happened. So I thought that was great. Okay, we've got two more Howie-isms, and we'll get back to advice for our listeners.
Does that exhaust the Howie-isms?
No,
I'll have to come up with more.
I think there's 102 more, but I just picked out a couple. But when somebody asks me to, and I'm sure you get this too, hey, can you sign the book or whatever? I one of my favorite signatures is "Life is too short to work with assholes." That's kind of my standard message. But you talk about don't waste time with sociopaths, bullies, and megalomaniacs, which maybe we're saying the same thing, but talk about that. I agree with you, but it's hard, right? And we struggle with it. So,
well, when you're that far off the narcissistic spectrum,
yeah,
some people they can't be empathic.
Yeah.
They can't understand what you're feeling.
Yeah.
They can't be emotionally intelligent. And they're super dangerous people because they're really all about themselves. This is the self-interest part of this trust equation.
Yeah.
If you can't trust somebody because they don't care about you,
right,
you can't have a meaningful relationship with them. If you think about the basis of, what's the trust is probably the most important basis of functional relationship.
Sure.
And, when you're talking about people that are off the scale on self-interest,
yeah,
can't trust them.
Right.
They can't be trusted. You can't have a relationship. And
Right.
if you think you can work for somebody and not have a relationship with them,
yeah,
I don't even know. I don't even know how to explain why that seems like it's not possible.
Right.
At least a functional relationship.
Yeah.
You can have a bad relationship with somebody like that.
Right.
That's okay.
Yep.
But I say, why?
Yeah.
Get the hell out of there. Go.
Well,
fly. Move. I had some experience, and with a person who I didn't realize that was a psychopath. I hadn't studied it. I hadn't looked at it, and I told this to a friend of mine who I used to work with when I wasn't working at Medtronic. For Medtronic. I was at Medtronic for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I had a good friend there, and told her my experience that I had with this. And she goes, read this book by, I think it's Martha Stout.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name, but it's about psychopathy and sociopathy.
Yeah.
I think it was called The Sociopath Next Door.
Okay.
Or The Psychopath Next Door.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yep.
So I read this book. And in the book, there are like 7 different characteristics of psychopathy. And if you have 4 of them, you're theoretically, clinically diagnosable as being a psychopath, right?
Okay.
And so it just made me realize that this wasn't me, this was this person, and the whole company was in shambles, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
And it was bad news. And if you read that book, you can just pick your favorite political foe. You can probably ascribe all 7 of those characteristics to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, then we'll come back to the last Howie-ism, but I was gonna talk about this with you, that you're talking about a political foe, and one of the things that I think is challenging for anyone right now, both at work and probably in their life, is how polarizing the world we live in currently is, and people feel like they have to pick a side. And I had a high school friend. We got together after not seeing each other for a long time, and he said, I liked it a lot better when we were growing up, and none of us knew who each other's parents voted for. We didn't care. We didn't even think to ask. And I was like, yeah, there's some value to that. But you wrote a blog, Breakfast and Ambivalence, and you kind of talk about this of, talking with
you dug
people.
Deep, man, into the archives.
I'm not messing around here. So,
okay.
But no, it was a great blog. And you talk about, it's really good and healthy, but a lot of people are struggling with engaging in really thoughtful and respectful conversation with people who have really different views than them. So I'd love to talk about where your philosophy on this comes from, and what led to that blog. I thought it was well written. So,
and that was written because of what we're seeing around us, the divisiveness and the fact that people aren't right or wrong. Now they're good or bad. They're enemies.
Right.
And I'm thinking this has really just gone way too far.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, people will choose a side without actually being that critically thinking or even, research the issue. They choose a side quickly.
Right. Right.
And once you choose a side, then you spend so much time and energy defending it, confirming your bias,
right,
whatever that is, watching the whatever news program, fits that narrative.
Yeah.
And you're not doing some critical thinking. When the fact of the matter is, we really don't know shit. Right?
Right. Right.
And just embrace that.
Yeah.
And so I actually started a movement. I haven't done much with it lately, though, but it's choose ambivalence, which is sort of an oxymoron.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful place to come from. You get to come from curiosity. You don't have to feel like you know anything.
Right.
You can have some ideas, but you can really ask questions and listen with great curiosity.
Right.
And there are people out there who, it's about values, and some people are more conservative and some are more liberal, but I find that there are plenty of people along that spectrum that are willing to have these great conversations. Right. And it just enriches your life to not choose a side.
Yeah.
Not if you don't have to. You ultimately have to make a choice.
Right.
When you go to vote, but it's like any decision you make in life. It could be the wrong one. Right. You're going to do your best, make a decision, move on.
Yeah.
So I think that ambivalence is really just a delightful perspective to go with, and just have discourse.
Right.
Learn, come up with a new idea that you don't have, and seek to understand, and and embrace the commonalities that we all have, which is that we're all afraid, right? We're all afraid, and we all like hamburgers. Other than that, there's probably something else though too, but
Yeah. Well, we won't get into the do you put ketchup on a hot dog argument or not, but we'll save that. We'll save that for another podcast. I will tell you, I think Choose Ambivalence could be a great title for your next book too. So don't forget about that.
All right.
And I think there's something about, this kind of lost art of just being able to do this, right? And we both talk about this in our coaching that, good leaders get to know their team. Great leaders take time to let their team get to know them. And I make an argument in my book that, hey, if you have a team of high performers, you should just be spending all of your time during your weekly meeting talking, right? Start the meeting with, what do you need from me to help finish what you're working on? Nothing. Great. How was your son's basketball game, right? Why do you need to talk about anything else if you have a team of high performers? When you have to be agenda focused and task oriented is when you have people who aren't, performing. But that aside, I just think there's something about, the ability to sit and have this conversation. You and I know each other pretty well. I don't think we're aligned on everything, globally and politically. I don't really even know, and I don't really care because I like you as a person, and I wish we could just sort of get back to that, and we've lost a little of it. But I don't want to get too deep on this. I want to keep this fun.
But it's where we are. It's where people are feeling a lot of pain right now. I think it's really fair to address it. So I appreciate that you brought that up. Yeah. And by the way, I have to read that article again. That got that got picked up, but this I just submitted it to the Star Tribune. I don't know if you know this. I submitted it just through the normal online letters to the editor portal, and they published it 3 days later in its entirety.
Oh wow. Nice.
Right.
And did they call you to tell you, or did somebody else tell you?
They emailed me.
Okay.
Oh no, they emailed me and said, "Can we use it?"
Yeah. Perfect.
Right. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah. All right. So this one I can't wait to hear your philosophy around. So our last Howie-ism for today: sometimes just care less.
Oh. Again, how important is anything?
Yeah.
And that ties into you're dead a long time.
Yeah.
Right. That's a corollary, or an adjunct to that one.
Right.
sometimes I think people just make a deal out of something.
Yeah.
And they just latch onto it. And all of a sudden it becomes a mission for them to have something go their way.
Yeah.
And look, you got kids, I got kids. As a parent, we want our kids to be good people and, to grow. But at some point, they become themselves.
Yeah.
And it's nice to care, but if you look at them and care so much that their lives become yours, it's unhealthy for everybody.
Right.
And it just lets you off the hook for having to make sure something goes perfectly.
Yeah.
I've always thought, like with weddings, planning weddings, and again, so I've married off a couple of kids, and I see the stress and anxiety about what's going around wedding planning. It's like, and this is some wisdom from Gail. She goes, no matter what happens, the time just passes. You get through it, and everybody will probably have a good enough time, right? But when you care that much about, the exact color for the bridesmaids or which flowers you're gonna have, it's like, that's a lot of energy, and it's probably not, it's not necessarily all that worth it. So I just think, and by the way, for my own athletic performance, so I remember, this is years ago. So I was bowling, and I was on a bowling league, and I actually got pretty good, but I got really good when I stopped caring so much. I said, just have fun, let it go, let whatever it is manifest itself. And all of a sudden, I end a year like at a 210 bowling average, which was a great year, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and I just told myself when I got up to the line, care less.
Yeah.
Erase my mind, care less.
And it worked.
I don't know, it worked. It worked.
It's kind of like the old Seinfeld episode when George decides to say the opposite of what he's thinking, and his life just starts to take off.
Right.
So I like it. Just care less.
Yeah, but it's just as I just think it works in so many areas. Just let yourself off the hook. It doesn't have to be, what's really that important.
Yeah. Well,
because you're dead a long time.
You're dead a long time. We're all very hard on ourselves, some of us more than others. So I always like to ask people, what's a book or two that you'd recommend? And, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it, but you sent me a book, which I really enjoyed, The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. What a great read. And I encourage people to read it as well. If I asked you that question, what's one book? Is that the one that you'd recommend, or is there another
right now?
one that you've read recently? Yeah,
right now, because embracing regret is embracing the wisdom that you've gained.
Yeah,
and understanding how things in the past didn't work out so well. If you can get in touch with it, you can change the way you act right now.
Yeah.
But also to use it as a decision-making tool to say, is this something that if I do now, how will I feel about it in 30 years or when I'm on my deathbed?
Yeah.
Again, what's most important here?
Yeah.
And, so try to mitigate future regrets and try to manage past regrets.
Yeah.
So regret can be it is a very useful thing. But people will say, I have no regrets.
Right.
Does that mean they're just too afraid to look at the stuff that they should be regretful of?
Right. Yeah.
And I think there's something there, because look, if you haven't made a mistake or you haven't hurt somebody, you're probably not trying hard enough. Sometimes you do it by accident, for sure. You just living life, you're bound to do something that's going to impact somebody in the wrong way, which to me is my biggest regrets are any hurts that I might have caused people in the past. And I still, and having read that book, it inspired me to do one thing that I was painful, or not painful, but uncomfortable. Did it, and it turned out to be the greatest experience. So
it's great.
I think so. I'm a big Daniel Pink fan.
Yeah. Oh, me too. And I think part of what you're talking about, and the theme from the book too, is what we've talked about, that, great leaders can admit when they're wrong. Great leaders can just be genuine. Back to this genuine and authentic. We all make mistakes. We all unintentionally hurt people. Of course, we all have regret. And the leaders who are, humble enough to say, hey, I messed up, right? I thought I was doing the right thing and I didn't. And, it's okay to say you're sorry as a leader as well, I think. And, some of these things that people think they can't do because they have to be the boss. And that's what I appreciate about you and your coaching and, the other leaders that share our philosophy of just be real, right? Be who you are. So,
yeah. And by the way, you can't be so hard on yourself to say, I'll live my life in a way that I can't regret anything in the future.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's just too much pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes things just happen. Sometimes you make the wrong choice.
Yeah.
You can't possibly know. We're really good, like in business, we're really good at looking at an explanation for what happened in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not that good at looking at, what our decision has done to affect the future.
Right.
Right. And you can be regretful about that, but you can't avoid it. I'm saying you just simply can't avoid it. But to get in touch with the regret, at least it enables you to learn from it and do something possibly different.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to end, but I will ask one other question before we wrap up here. Anything that you were hoping we were going to get into and talk about today that we haven't covered?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I showed up, Eric, just trying to be who you needed me to be today.
Well, I appreciate it.
And no, I had no agenda, which is a great way to go through life, by the way.
And I had no agenda either, which I hope our listeners appreciate. I really genuinely want to sit and just have, thoughtful conversation with really smart people who, again, are just as committed as I am to, trying to get to a point where we're not talking about Monday morning sucking, and we're not talking about, whatever word you want to use for a bad leader, fill in your own blank. Because you and I've talked about this, and I talk about it all the time. A bad leader will never create a good culture because they don't know what it looks like and they don't care about it. So I appreciate the work you're doing for our listeners. Check out Howie Milstein. Go ahead and give a shameless plug. Which vehicle would you like people to find you on? Your
I'm the easiest guy to find. Just go to LinkedIn. I don't know if there's any other Howie Milsteins out there. Eric, this was a blast, and you're going to have zillions of guests. I just now will look forward to the rotation when you start bringing back old guests, because you've had enough on by now.
Well, you set the bar pretty high, so I don't know who's going to follow you, but they got big shoes to fill. I do really appreciate you. One thing about Howie, he's very giving with his time and very authentic. So really, please do reach out. If you are a senior level leader that's looking for a Vistage opportunity and some executive coaching, there's nobody better than Howie. So with that,
thank you for that. I appreciate that, Eric.
Absolutely. And I look forward to connecting when you get back from sunny California, as I sit here in snowy Minnesota. But go play some pickleball or something. And
sounds good. Coffee and mayo, right?
Perfect. Love it.
Got it. All right.
Thanks, Howie.
Be well.
Great. You bet.